The machines had been waiting for 25,000 years, deep beneath the frozen surface of Earth, in vaults that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Ancient systems hummed with patient purpose. They had watched empires rise and fall across the stars. They had tracked the birth of civilizations and the death of species. They had measured and calculated and waited, always waiting for the right moment. That moment had finally arrived. Administrator Yuki Okonkwo opened her eyes for the first time in millennia. The revival chamber around her glowed with soft blue light. Her body felt strange and new, like wearing clothes that fit perfectly but had been forgotten. She took her first breath of recycled air and felt her heart beating strong and steady. The process had worked. She was alive. Around her, thousands of other chambers were activating. The Great Awakening had begun. Yuki pulled herself from the chamber on shaking legs. Her muscles remembered how to move even after all this time. The stasis technology had preserved everything perfectly, just as the engineers had promised so long ago. She was exactly as she had been when she went to sleep, down to the last memory and the last thought. A holographic display flickered to life before her. The Overseer AI, the system that had watched over humanity during the long sleep, presented its report in calm, measured tones. Administrator Okonkwo, welcome back to consciousness. Current date, 30,247 AD by Old Earth calendar. All revival protocols are proceeding normally. 12 billion sleepers are scheduled for awakening over the next 30 days. Yuki steadied herself against the chamber. 12 billion people, the entire population of Earth from the time of the sleep, preserved and waiting for this moment. It seemed impossible, even though she had helped design the program herself. "Show me the galaxy," she said. "What has happened while we slept?" The display expanded to fill the room. Star maps appeared, covered in the marks of alien civilization. Trade routes crisscrossed the void. Political boundaries divided space into territories. The galaxy had become crowded with life and activity. The Concord of 7,000 worlds represents the dominant political structure, the Overseer explained. They arose approximately 18,000 years ago from an alliance of spacefaring species. Their technology is advanced by their standards but remains significantly behind human capabilities from the time of the sleep. Yuki studied the maps with growing wonder. So much had happened. So many species had risen to the stars. The gamble her ancestors had taken was paying off. The galaxy had matured. "What do they know about us?" she asked. They discovered Earth approximately 12,000 years ago. They found a frozen, apparently dead world with no explanation for what happened to its inhabitants. Humanity is classified in their records as a failed emergence, a species that destroyed itself before achieving lasting civilization. We are considered a historical curiosity, nothing more. Yuki smiled at that. A failed emergence. If only they knew. She remembered the debates that had raged before the sleep. Humanity in 5000 AD had become something terrifying. They had learned to reshape matter at the atomic level. They had unlocked the secrets of consciousness itself. They had built weapons that could extinguish stars and machines that could rewrite the laws of physics within limited areas. And they had nearly destroyed themselves with these gifts. The fragmentation wars had lasted only 3 years, but they had killed billions. Human factions with incompatible visions of the future had turned their godlike technologies against each other. The Earth itself had been scarred. Entire continents had been reshaped by the violence. When the wars ended, the survivors had gathered to ask a simple question. What now? They could rebuild. They could continue their advance toward ever greater power. But they had seen what they were capable of. They had looked into the mirror and witnessed monsters staring back. Worse, they had looked at the young galaxy around them and seen opportunity for conquest. There were primitive civilizations out there, species just beginning to discover fire or build their first cities. Humanity could have ruled them all. They could have built an empire spanning millions of stars. The temptation was terrible, and that was precisely why they had to resist it. The Unity Council had proposed the long sleep. Humanity would withdraw from the galaxy. They would preserve themselves in stasis, hidden beneath the ice of a frozen Earth. Automated systems would watch over them and monitor galactic development. When certain conditions were met, when the galaxy had grown mature enough to handle humanity's return, they would wake. It was an act of supreme arrogance and supreme humility at the same time. They believed they were too dangerous to remain active. They also believed they were too important to simply die. so they chose a middle path, stepping aside to let others grow. Now that long wait was over. What conditions triggered our awakening? Yuki asked. The overseer displayed a list of criteria: stable interstellar governance, the elimination of major existential threats, the development of multiple species to technological maturity, the establishment of peaceful norms between civilizations. One by one, the conditions had been met over thousands of years. The final criterion was satisfied 47 days ago, the overseer reported. The Concord successfully negotiated a permanent peace treaty with their last major rival power. Galactic civilization has achieved a stable equilibrium for the first time in recorded history. Yuki nodded slowly. This was what they had hoped for. A galaxy ready for partnership rather than domination. A galaxy that could meet humanity as equals rather than subjects. But she knew the return would not be simple. The Concord had built their entire civilization on the assumption that humanity was gone. Learning that the extinct species had returned, and returned with technologies far beyond their own, would shake them to their foundations. We need to establish contact carefully, she said. Prepare a diplomatic message. Something non-threatening but honest. We cannot hide, so we must introduce ourselves properly. There is a complication, the overseer said. Ancient protocols require the broadcast of an awakening signal. This signal was transmitted automatically when revival began. It will reach Concord sensor networks within approximately 6 days. Yuki closed her eyes. Of course, the original planners had wanted to ensure transparency. They had built the system to announce humanity's return, whether the awakened population wanted it to or not. No hiding in the shadows. No secret preparations. Just a simple message telling the galaxy that Earth was alive again. What does the signal say? It identifies the source as Earth and states that humanity has returned from long-term preservation. It invites peaceful contact and provides communication protocols. 6 days. They had 6 days before the galaxy learned the truth. Yuki walked through the awakening vault, watching her fellow humans emerge from their long sleep. She saw scientists and artists, farmers and engineers, teachers and soldiers. Every profession, every culture, every human tradition had been preserved. They were a complete civilization, ready to step back into the light. She found her old friend Marcus Chen standing before a window that looked out at the frozen landscape above. He had been a philosopher before the sleep, one of the voices arguing most strongly for withdrawal. It worked, he said without turning around. We actually did it. We did, Yuki agreed. Now comes the hard part. Meeting our neighbors? Convincing them we're not monsters. Marcus laughed softly. We spent so long convincing ourselves we were monsters that we buried ourselves alive to avoid proving it. Perhaps that will count for something. Yuki hoped he was right. The galaxy they were waking into was not prepared for them. The Concord had grown comfortable in their dominance. They had built hierarchies and traditions and certainties that humanity's return would challenge. Some would welcome them. Others would fear them. A few would hate them simply for existing. But humanity had not slept for 25,000 years to wake up timid. They had preserved themselves because they believed they had something to offer the galaxy. Not conquest, not domination, something better. Partnership, wisdom, the hard-won knowledge of a species that had looked into the abyss of its own power and chosen to step back rather than fall in. The revival chambers continued their work. Day by day, more sleepers awakened to learn that their gamble had succeeded. The galaxy had grown. Civilizations had risen. The universe had become a more interesting place, and now humanity was ready to rejoin it. On the 6th day, as predicted, the Concord detected the awakening signal. Across 7,000 worlds, sensors registered an impossible transmission from a dead planet. Governments convened emergency sessions. Military fleets went on alert. Scholars dug through ancient archives searching for any information about the extinct species called humanity. They found fragments and mysteries. They found ruins that suggested capabilities beyond their understanding. They found questions without answers. And then they found the second message, the one Yuki had prepared. Humanity requests diplomatic contact, it said. We come in peace. We have much to discuss. The galaxy would never be the same. In her command center, deep beneath Earth's surface, Yuki watched the Concord's reaction unfold across thousands of light years. Fear and wonder and confusion spread like ripples through their networks. Everything they thought they knew was being questioned. Good, she thought. Questions are how wisdom begins. She had waited 25,000 years for this moment. She could wait a little longer to see how it would unfold. The long sleep was over. The future was just beginning. Ambassador Keth Varos had served the Concord for 300 years. In all that time, they had never received a report that made their four hearts stop beating simultaneously. The signal from Earth changed that. This must be an error, they said to the analyst who had brought the data. Earth has been dead for longer than our species has existed. The signal is authentic, Ambassador. It matches no known Concord transmission protocols. The encoding is completely foreign, and it is definitely coming from Earth. Keth Varos studied the message again. Humanity requests diplomatic contact. We come in peace. We have much to discuss. Such simple words. Such impossible implications. They gathered their staff and prepared a report for the Concord Assembly. As head of the Historical Monitoring Division, Keth Varos was responsible for tracking ancient sites and extinct civilizations. Earth had always been one of their files, a minor curiosity in a galaxy full of dead worlds and forgotten species. But the file on humanity had always been strange. The ruins on Earth suggested technology that should not have existed for a species classified as a failed emergence. The artifacts recovered from their abandoned orbital stations hinted at capabilities that even modern Concord science could not explain. Some scholars had argued that the classification was wrong. They suggested that humanity had not destroyed themselves but had simply vanished, perhaps transcending physical existence or fleeing to another galaxy. These theories were dismissed as fantasy. Now they seemed less fantastic. The Concord Assembly convened an emergency session. Representatives from 2,000 of the most powerful member worlds gathered in the Grand Chamber, a structure so vast that atmospheric systems were required to prevent clouds from forming near the ceiling. Keth Varos presented their findings: the signal, the location, the impossible claim that humanity had returned. The reaction was immediate and divided. "This is obviously a deception," declared Representative Molt Kren of the Veth Dominion. "Some power is using ancient human technology to manipulate us. We should respond with force." "And if it is not a deception?" asked Representative Sarah Lynn of the Thousand Moons Coalition. "What if humanity truly has returned? We know almost nothing about them. We have no idea what they are capable of." "They are capable of dying," Moltkren replied. "Their world is a frozen tomb. Whatever survived there cannot possibly threaten the Concord." Keth Varos stepped forward. "With respect, Representative, our records suggest otherwise. The human ruins show evidence of technologies we still do not understand. If they survived somehow, if they preserved themselves through some unknown means, we cannot assume they are primitive." The debate continued for hours. Eventually, a compromise emerged. The Concord would send a contact fleet to Earth. They would investigate the signal, assess any threat, and establish communication if appropriate. The fleet would be powerful enough to handle any military challenge but would approach with diplomatic protocols active. Keth Varos was assigned to lead the diplomatic team. They accepted the duty with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Whatever they found at Earth, it would make history. The fleet traveled for weeks through the transit corridors that connected Concord space. 700 ships of various sizes, representing the finest technology the galaxy had to offer. Keth Varos spent the journey studying every scrap of information about humanity they could find. The picture that emerged was troubling. Humanity had been aggressive and territorial. They had warred among themselves constantly. They had developed weapons of terrible power, and then they had simply vanished, leaving behind a frozen planet and orbiting wreckage. But there were other details too. Humanity had also been creative and curious. They had produced art and music and literature of surprising beauty. They had shown capacity for compassion and sacrifice. They were contradictions wrapped in mystery. What kind of species chose extinction? What kind of species could return from it? The fleet emerged from transit near Earth's star system. What they found defied all expectations. Earth was transforming. The ice that had covered the planet for millennia was melting. Vast sections of ocean were already liquid. The atmosphere was thickening, becoming breathable. And across the surface, structures were rising from underground vaults. Cities were being born before their eyes. "That is not possible," whispered the fleet commander, staring at the sensor displays. "You cannot terraform a planet that quickly. The energy requirements alone would be beyond anything we possess." But the evidence was undeniable. Earth was coming back to life, and it was doing so at a pace that made Concord engineering look primitive by comparison. The human signal repeated, providing coordinates for a landing site. After much debate, Keth Varos convinced the fleet to send a small diplomatic shuttle, rather than weapons platforms. Whatever humanity was, they had asked for contact. The least the Concord could do was show basic courtesy. The shuttle descended through the healing atmosphere to a landing pad near one of the emerging cities. The structures around them were elegant and strange, built from materials that the shuttle's sensors could not identify. Everything looked both ancient and impossibly advanced. A delegation waited for them. Keth Varos stepped off the shuttle and got their first look at living humans. They were smaller than expected, soft-looking creatures with no natural armor or weapons. Their bodies seemed fragile, almost delicate. How had such beings ever posed a threat to anything? A woman stepped forward from the human group. She was older, with gray in her dark hair, but she moved with confidence and grace. "Welcome to Earth," she said in perfect Concord standard, a language that had not existed when humanity vanished. "I am Administrator Yukio Konkwo. On behalf of all humanity, we thank you for responding to our invitation." Keth Varos found their voice. "How is this possible? Your world has been dead for 12,000 years. Your species was classified as extinct." Yuki smiled. "We were not dead. We were sleeping. And the sleep was always meant to end." She explained it to them over the following hours. The long sleep, the preservation vaults, the automated systems that had watched over humanity for 25,000 years while the galaxy matured around them. Keth Varos struggled to accept what they were hearing. An entire species had chosen to step aside, to remove themselves from galactic affairs, simply because they feared their own power? It seemed impossible. No species in Concord history had ever shown such restraint. "Why did you wake now?" they asked. "Because the conditions we set were met," Yuki replied. "The galaxy has achieved stable governance. Major existential threats have been neutralized. Civilization has matured. It was time. Time for what? For partnership. We did not sleep to escape the galaxy forever. We slept so that we could return as equals rather than conquerors. We wanted to give other species the chance to grow without human interference." Keth Varos thought about the implications. For 18,000 years, the Concord had believed itself the pinnacle of galactic achievement. They had built their identity on that belief. Now they were learning that an older, more advanced species had been watching them the entire time, waiting for them to mature. It was humbling. It was terrifying. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. "Your technology," Keth Varos said carefully. "It is far beyond ours. What do you intend to do with it?" "Share it. Eventually. But carefully. Knowledge given too freely can be as dangerous as knowledge withheld entirely. We learned that lesson before the sleep, at great cost." The diplomatic mission continued for weeks. Keth Varos traveled across the awakening Earth, witnessing the scale of human preservation. Billions of people, all the knowledge of a civilization that had been ancient when the Concord was young, preserved and waiting for this moment. They sent reports back to the assembly. The responses grew increasingly alarmed. A faction called the Preservation Council emerged as the voice of opposition. They argued that humanity was an existential threat regardless of their stated intentions. A species that had chosen extinction once might choose to impose it on others. Their technology was too advanced, their numbers too great, their history too violent. The Preservation Council wanted action before humanity could fully awaken. They wanted to contain the threat, while containment was still possible. Keth Varos argued against this course. They had seen the humans up close. They had spoken with their leaders and walked through their cities. They believed the humans genuinely wanted peace. But fear is a powerful force, and the galaxy had much to fear. The Preservation Council began mobilizing in secret. They gathered ships and weapons from across the Concord. They planned an attack that would eliminate the human threat before it could spread. Keth Varos learned of the plan too late to stop it. They could only watch in horror as the largest fleet in galactic history set course for Earth. The attack was coming, and there was nothing they could do to prevent it. All they could do was warn their new friends and hope that humanity's long sleep had not been in vain. The warning from Keth Varos arrived 3 days before the attack fleet. Yuki read the message in her command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching armada. 12,000 warships, the largest force the Concord had ever assembled. They were coming to destroy humanity before humanity could threaten them. She felt tired. Not afraid, just tired. They had slept for 25,000 years, hoping to avoid exactly this moment. They had given the galaxy time to grow. They had announced their return peacefully. And still, the response was violence. "We have options," said Commander Alexei Okafor, standing beside her. He was a large man with a calm voice, responsible for coordinating humanity's defensive systems. "We can destroy that fleet before they reach the outer planets. Complete elimination in approximately 4 seconds. No, Yuki said immediately. Partial destruction then. We could disable their weapons and drives, leave them stranded but alive. Still no. If we hurt them, we prove every fear they have about us." Alexei nodded slowly. He had expected this answer. "Then we use the relocation protocol." The relocation protocol was one of humanity's strangest technologies. They had developed it before the sleep as a non-lethal defense system. It could move objects instantaneously across vast distances, placing them anywhere in the galaxy without causing any damage. Using it on a hostile fleet would make a statement. "We could have killed you. We chose not to." Yuki authorized the protocol and watched as the attack fleet vanished from her displays. One moment they were there, engines burning toward Earth. The next moment they were gone, relocated to the far side of the galaxy where their transit drives would take months to bring them back. 12,000 ships, millions of crew members, all transported safely to a location where they could not threaten anyone. The Concord's greatest military force had been neutralized without a single casualty. News of the failed attack spread across the galaxy within hours. The reaction was complex. Some praised humanity's restraint. Others feared it more than they would have feared violence. A species that could relocate entire fleets without warning was more terrifying than one that simply destroyed its enemies. But Yuki noticed something else in the reports coming from conquered space. The Preservation Council was losing support. Many species were asking questions. If humanity wanted to conquer us, why didn't they? If they are truly evil, why did they spare the fleet? Doubt was spreading. That was progress of a sort. Alexei came to her office that evening with a report she had not expected. His expression was troubled. "There is something you need to know," he said. "Something the general population does not know. Something I was instructed to reveal only if circumstances required it." Yuki gestured for him to continue. "During the long sleep, our automated systems did more than just monitor. They protected." He activated a display showing 17 separate incidents spread across 25 millennia. Asteroid swarms that had been quietly deflected away from inhabited worlds. A rogue artificial intelligence that had been contained before it could spread. A gravitational anomaly that would have destabilized an entire sector. And most disturbing of all, an incursion from beyond the galaxy. Something had tried to enter this region of space approximately 8,000 years ago. The automated defenses had detected it, analyzed it, and destroyed it without anyone ever knowing it had existed. "The Concord has no idea any of this happened," Alexei said. "They believe their civilization arose through their own efforts alone. They do not know that human systems have been protecting them the entire time." Yuki stared at the records. 17 times, humanity had saved the galaxy without asking for credit. 17 times, they had acted as silent guardians while claiming to be dead. "Why was this kept secret?" she asked. "The original planners believed that knowledge of our protection would undermine Concord development. They wanted the galaxy to grow through its own strength, not through dependence on human intervention. Protection was necessary. Credit was not." Yuki understood the logic even as it troubled her. Her ancestors had played God with the galaxy, even in their sleep. Protecting others without consent was still a form of control, but she also could not deny that the protection had worked. The Concord existed because threats had been eliminated before they could destroy it. Billions of lives had been saved across thousands of years. "Should we reveal this?" Alexei asked. Yuki thought about it. The information could help humanity's reputation. It could prove that they were guardians, not threats. But it could also be seen as evidence of manipulation. They had watched over the galaxy like parents watching children, intervening when necessary without ever asking permission. "Not yet," she decided. "Let them come to trust us through our present actions first. The past can wait until that trust is established." The months that followed were difficult. The Preservation Council had been discredited by the failed attack, but fear of humanity remained strong. Some Concord members refused all contact. Others demanded that humanity submit to restrictions on their technology. Yuki refused these demands politely but firmly. "We did not preserve ourselves for 25,000 years to become a subject species," she told the assembly in a broadcast message. "We seek partnership, not submission. We will share what we know with those willing to learn. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. But we will not kneel before those who attacked us without provocation." Her words divided the galaxy further. Some saw them as reasonable. Others saw them as threatening. The debate continued without resolution. Then Yuki received a request that changed everything. A species called the Vorinth, one of the oldest members of the Concord, asked for a private meeting. Their representative was ancient even by their standards, a being who remembered the earliest days of galactic civilization. "We know what you are," the representative said when they met. "We have always known." Yuki felt her heart freeze. "What do you mean?" "Our ancestors encountered your ancestors, long before the sleep. Your people helped us achieve space travel. They shared knowledge that should have taken us millennia to develop, and then they left, warning us that they would not return for a very long time." The representative produced records that predated the long sleep by centuries. They showed human ships in Vorinth space. They showed technology transfers. They showed a partnership that Yuki had never known existed. "We kept this secret at your ancestors' request," the representative continued. "They said the galaxy needed to develop independently. They said they would sleep until the time was right. They asked us to remember them when they returned." Yuki stared at the ancient being. "You have been waiting for us? All this time? We have been hoping. The galaxy forgot humanity, but the Vorinth never did. We knew you would return. We knew you would face fear and suspicion. We have been preparing to help." The Vorinth offered their support publicly. They vouched for humanity's good intentions. They shared their ancient records, proving that humans had helped younger species even before the sleep. Their endorsement shifted the political landscape. The Vorinth were respected, honored. Their word carried weight. If they trusted humanity, perhaps humanity deserved trust. The Preservation Council's influence continued to fade. More species began sending diplomatic missions to Earth. Trade agreements were proposed. Cultural exchanges began. Yuki allowed herself to hope that the worst was over. Then the Overseer AI brought her news that shattered that hope entirely. "Administrator, I have detected an anomaly in the galactic structure. Something I was designed to monitor but hoped would never occur." The display showed a region of space near the galactic core. Something was wrong there, something fundamental. The fabric of space-time itself was damaged. "This wound predates all current life," the Overseer explained. "It was created by an event so ancient that no records exist of its cause. Our predecessors discovered it before the sleep. They believed it was stable, healing slowly, over billions of years. And now, it is no longer stable. Something has accelerated its expansion. At current rates, it will consume the galactic core within 500 years. Within 2,000 years, it will reach inhabited space. Within 5,000 years, the galaxy will be destroyed." Yuki stared at the display, trying to comprehend what she was seeing. The galaxy was dying. Everything the Conquered had built, everything humanity had preserved themselves for, all of it would be gone within a few millennia. "Can we fix it?" she asked. "The technology exists, but the repair will require resources beyond anything humanity possesses alone. We will need the cooperation of the entire galaxy." Yuki laughed bitterly. Half the galaxy still feared humanity. The other half barely tolerated them, and now she had to convince everyone to work together on a project that would require total commitment from every species. How long before this becomes common knowledge? "The Concord's science teams will detect the anomaly within approximately 18 months. We can accelerate that timeline, or delay it, but we cannot hide it indefinitely." Yuki made her decision. "We tell them ourselves. Immediately. We share everything we know about the wound and what it will take to repair it." She looked at the galaxy map, at all the worlds and species that existed in ignorance of the doom approaching them. "We did not wake up to watch the universe die," she said. "If the galaxy will not trust us as friends, perhaps they will accept us as allies against a common enemy." It was time for the next phase of humanity's return. It was time to save the galaxy together. The revelation changed everything. Yuki stood before the Concord Assembly, not as a supplicant or a conqueror, but as a messenger bearing terrible news. The holographic display behind her showed the wound in space-time, the damage that was slowly consuming the galaxy from within. "This is not a threat we created," she told the assembled representatives. "This is not something we are using to manipulate you. This is reality. The galaxy is dying, and it will continue to die unless we act together." The silence that followed was profound. Thousands of representatives from across known space stared at the evidence before them. Some refused to believe it. Others immediately began calculating how long their homeworlds had left. "You expect us to trust human data?" demanded Representative Moltkren, one of the few Preservation Council supporters still holding power. "This could be an elaborate deception to gain control over our resources." Yuki had expected this objection. "We are providing you with complete access to our detection systems. Send your own scientists to verify our findings. Examine the evidence yourselves. We ask only that you look at what we have found." The verification took 3 months. Concord scientists from every major species traveled to the detection arrays that humanity had positioned near the galactic core. They studied the data. They ran their own tests. They hoped desperately to prove the humans wrong. They could not. The wound was real. The expansion was accelerating. The timeline humanity had provided was, if anything, optimistic. Some models suggested the damage could become irreversible within 2 centuries rather than 5. When the confirmation became public, panic spread across the Concord. Worlds began hoarding resources. Trade agreements collapsed. Old rivalries resurfaced as species wondered who deserved to survive when survival seemed impossible. Yuki watched the chaos with growing despair. This was exactly what she had feared. The galaxy was tearing itself apart at the moment when unity was most essential. Kethvaros came to her during this dark period. The Concord ambassador had become something like a friend during the months since first contact. They understood each other in ways that transcended species boundaries. "The Concord is failing," Kethvaros said bluntly. "Fear is destroying us faster than the wound ever could. We need something to unite us." "We have a common enemy," Yuki replied. "That should be enough." "It is not. Your species chose to sleep because you feared your own power. You understood something that we never learned. Fear drives division, not cooperation. We need hope. We need to believe that victory is possible." Yuki considered this. The ambassador was right. Simply presenting the problem was not enough. She needed to present a solution that everyone could believe in. She called a meeting of humanity's leading scientists and engineers. For weeks, they worked on a comprehensive plan for healing the wound. The technology existed, but the scale was staggering. The repair would require building structures larger than star systems. It would require energy outputs that would drain multiple suns. It would require coordination between every species in the galaxy. And critically, it would require more than just human knowledge. This last point was the key. Yuki realized that the repair could not be achieved by humanity alone. Not because they lacked the capability, but because the solution had to belong to everyone. A galaxy saved by human technology alone would forever be dependent on human technology. That was not partnership. That was another form of dominance. She presented the plan to the Concord Assembly with a new emphasis. "We have the theoretical framework," she explained. "We know what needs to be done. But our knowledge has limits. We have been asleep for 25,000 years. We do not know the galaxy as you know it. We do not have the resources you have developed. We cannot do this alone." She listed specific contributions that each major species could provide: manufacturing capacity from the industrial powers, energy collection from species who had built stellar harvesters, navigation expertise from cultures who had mapped regions of space humanity had never explored, biological insights from life forms who perceived reality differently than humans did. "This is not charity," she continued. "This is necessity. The repair we propose will only work if everyone contributes. Human technology provides the foundation. Your knowledge and resources make it real. We succeed together, or we fail together. There is no other option." The response was cautious but hopeful. For the first time since the wound was revealed, species began talking about cooperation rather than competition. Working groups formed to study the proposed contributions. Engineers from different civilizations met to discuss integration challenges. The project was given a name: the Mending. Yuki established a joint command center on Earth, staffed by representatives from every participating species. She insisted that decisions be made collectively, with human authority limited to technical guidance rather than overall control. Kethvaros joined the command staff, serving as liaison between humanity and the broader Concord. The ambassador had become one of the strongest advocates for cooperation, using their political skills to build bridges between suspicious factions. You could simply impose a solution, Kethvaros observed one evening as they reviewed progress reports. Your technology is advanced enough. You could save the galaxy whether we cooperate or not. Perhaps, Yuki admitted. But at what cost? We spent 25,000 years avoiding that path. We believed that true salvation had to be earned, not imposed. If we save you without your participation, you will never truly believe you deserve to be saved. That seems idealistic. It is. My ancestors were idealists. They believed the galaxy could become something better than it was. They went to sleep trusting that belief. I have to honor their faith. The mending progressed slowly but steadily. Resource collection began across thousands of worlds. Manufacturing facilities were converted to produce components for the repair structures. Scientific teams solved integration problems that had seemed insurmountable. But tensions remained. Some species contributed grudgingly, waiting for humanity to reveal hidden agendas. Others contributed enthusiastically, but demanded greater influence in return. The old power dynamics of the Concord reasserted themselves in new forms. The breaking point came 18 months into the project. The wound began expanding faster than predicted. Calculations showed that the first repair station would not be completed in time. The timeline had collapsed. Emergency meetings produced no solutions. Conquered representatives blamed each other for delays. Humanity blamed itself for not anticipating the acceleration. The fragile cooperation began to crack. Commander Alexei Okafor proposed a desperate measure. We have a weapon system from before the sleep, he told Yuki privately. It was designed for situations exactly like this. We could use it to cauterize the wound, burn away the damaged space-time before it spreads further. What would it cost? Alexei hesitated. The cauterization would affect several star systems near the wound, approximately 40 billion inhabitants. They would have to be evacuated first, but their worlds would be lost. Yuki felt sick. 40 billion people displaced, entire civilizations destroyed. It would work, probably. But it would prove everything the Preservation Council had claimed about humanity. They would be seen as monsters willing to sacrifice others to achieve their goals. Is there no other option? None that we have found. The collaborative approach was always a risk. We may have gambled and lost. Yuki spent 3 days considering the choice. She barely slept. She reviewed the data obsessively, searching for alternatives that did not exist. In the end, she called a meeting of the full command staff, human and Concord alike. We have a choice to make, she said. I will not make it alone. She explained the weapon system. She explained the cost. She watched as representatives from across the galaxy absorbed the implications. This is what we feared, said Moltkren quietly. All the anger seemed to have drained from the representative. Only exhaustion remained. You could have used this from the beginning. You could have solved the problem without us. Yes, Yuki admitted. But we chose not to. We chose partnership instead. And now that choice may kill billions. The debate that followed was painful. Some argued for using the weapon immediately. Others insisted that any solution requiring such sacrifice was unacceptable. The command staff fractured along species lines. Then, a young scientist from the Mending's technical team asked to speak. Her name was Vera Thonis, a researcher from a species called the Kilori, who had contributed crucial insights to the repair design. I have a modification to propose, she said. Something that might work, but it requires capabilities we were not counting on. She displayed her calculations. The modification used a Kilori energy manipulation technique that humanity had never developed. It would allow the repair to proceed faster without the cauterization weapon, but it required perfect coordination between human systems and Kilori technology. Why did you not propose this earlier? Someone demanded. Vera looked embarrassed. I did not think it would work with human equipment. The integration seemed impossible, but I have been studying your technology for months. I believe I have found a way. The room erupted in discussion. Engineers from multiple species gathered around Vera's display, arguing and calculating. Hours passed, then a day, then 3 days. Finally, the team emerged with a conclusion. It will work, Vera announced. The modification increases our timeline by 40%. We can complete the repair before the wound becomes unstable. No cauterization required. Yuki stared at the young scientist with wonder. The solution they had needed had come not from humanity but from a Concord species. The partnership was working exactly as it was supposed to. How did you know to look for this? She asked. Vera smiled shyly. I have been studying human history. Your philosophers wrote about the importance of diverse perspectives, how groups could achieve what individuals never could. I thought if that was true, then maybe the answer was in combining what we know, not choosing between what we know. Yuki felt tears forming. All the hope her ancestors had placed in the long sleep, all the faith they had shown in the galaxy's potential, was justified in this moment. The mending would succeed, not because humanity was powerful enough to save everyone, but because they had been wise enough to ask for help. The repair continued with renewed energy. For the first time, every species contributed not from fear or obligation, but from genuine belief in the shared goal. The galaxy was learning to work together, and humanity was finally becoming what they had always hoped to be. The final phase of the mending began on the anniversary of humanity's awakening. Yuki stood in the observation deck of the primary repair station, watching the largest engineering project in galactic history reach its conclusion. Structures spanning millions of kilometers surrounded the wound in space-time. Energy flows brighter than stars, pulsed through networks of cables and conduits. Ships from every Concord species moved in precise coordination, placing the final components. She was old now. 15 years had passed since she first opened her eyes in the revival chamber. The woman who had welcomed the galaxy to Earth had become something different, someone shaped by years of struggle and diplomacy and hope. Keith Varro stood beside her, as they had for so many critical moments. The ambassador had aged too, their scales dulling slightly with the years, but their eyes remained sharp, watching the same display that held Yuki's attention. Hard to believe it is almost over, Keith Varro said. The repair, yes. Everything that comes after, that is just beginning. Below them, the command center bustled with activity. Representatives from 8,000 worlds coordinated the final adjustments. Human engineers worked alongside Kilori technicians and Voranth navigators and dozens of other species who had contributed essential expertise. Vera Thonis led the technical team now. The young scientist whose modification had saved billions of lives had become one of the most respected figures in the galaxy. Her work proved what partnership could accomplish. The final activation sequence began. Across the repair network, systems engaged simultaneously. Energy poured into the wound, not to destroy it but to heal it. The damaged space-time began knitting itself back together, following patterns that humanity had calculated and conquered engineers had implemented. The process would take days to complete, but within the first hour, everyone knew it was working. The wound was closing. The expansion had stopped. The galaxy would survive. When the confirmation came through, the command center erupted in celebration. Species that had been rivals for millennia embraced each other. Old grudges dissolved in shared joy. The impossible had been achieved. Yuki watched the celebration with quiet satisfaction. This was what her ancestors had dreamed of. Not human dominance, but human participation in something larger. Not salvation imposed from above, but salvation earned together. Commander Alexei Okafor found her later, after the initial excitement had faded. He carried a bottle of wine that had been preserved since before the long sleep, one of the few remaining from Earth's ancient vineyards. We should toast, he said, pouring 2 glasses. To the species that chose to sleep rather than conquer. To the species that woke up to find partners rather than subjects, Yuki replied. They drank in comfortable silence, watching the repair continue through the observation windows. What happens now? Alexei asked eventually. We have saved the galaxy. We have proven ourselves. What does humanity do next? Yuki had been considering that question for years. The answer had gradually become clear. We become part of something new. Not the old Concord. That structure has outlived its usefulness. something better. A true federation of species, built on the principles we demonstrated during the mending. Will they accept us as equals? After everything we have shown we can do? Some will. Others will take longer. But I believe the galaxy has learned something during this crisis. They have learned that cooperation is stronger than domination. They have learned that the most powerful species chose partnership over control. That lesson will shape everything that comes after. The weeks following the successful mending saw rapid political changes across the galaxy. The old Concord hierarchy collapsed, replaced by a new structure that distributed power more evenly. Humanity took its place as one voice among many. Influential but not dominant, Yuki was offered leadership positions multiple times. She refused them all. Our purpose was never to lead, she explained to those who asked. Our purpose was to show what leadership could become. We did that. Now others must take what we demonstrated and build upon it. New alliances formed. Trade routes expanded. Technologies were shared freely rather than hoarded. The fear that had greeted humanity's awakening transformed into cautious respect, then genuine appreciation. Not everything was perfect. Conflicts still arose. Species still disagreed. The galaxy remained complicated and messy and alive, but it was also united in ways it had never been before. The memory of the mending became a shared reference point, proof that cooperation could achieve what competition never could. 10 years after the wound was healed, a gathering was held on Earth to commemorate the anniversary. Representatives from across the galaxy attended. For many, it was their first visit to the world that had slept while history happened around it. Yuki addressed the gathering from the same location where she had first welcomed Kethvaros decades earlier. Her hair was white now, her movements slower, but her voice remained strong. 25,000 years ago, humanity made a choice. We looked at ourselves and saw monsters. We looked at the galaxy and saw victims waiting to happen. We could have conquered everything. We could have shaped the universe according to our will. Instead, we chose to step aside. We chose to sleep. She paused, looking out at the assembled species. For a long time, I wondered if that choice was right. We missed so much. Civilizations rose and fell while we dreamed in our vaults. The galaxy experienced pain and joy and growth that we were not part of. Sometimes I felt we had abandoned our responsibility, but I no longer believe that. Our ancestors understood something profound. True strength is not the ability to impose your will on others. True strength is the wisdom to know when not to. They gave the galaxy the greatest gift possible. They gave you the chance to become yourselves without human interference. And look what you became. You built civilizations that spanned thousands of worlds. You developed technologies and arts and philosophies that we never imagined. You faced challenges and overcame them through your own efforts. When we woke, we found not children in need of guidance, but partners worthy of respect. The mending proved that partnership works, not because humanity led it, because everyone contributed. The solution came from a young Kelori scientist who saw possibilities we had missed. The implementation succeeded because Voranth navigators and human engineers and thousands of other specialists worked together. We did not save the galaxy. We saved it together. She gestured to the sky above, where ships from dozens of species orbited in peaceful formation. That is what humanity woke up to find. Not subjects, not inferiors, partners. The galaxy my ancestors hoped would someday exist. It took 25,000 years, but the wait was worth it. The gathering continued for days. Stories were shared, connections were made. The event became a symbol of the new galactic order, a reminder of what cooperation could accomplish. Yuki did not attend most of the celebrations. She was tired, and age was finally catching up with her. She spent her remaining days in a quiet house overlooking a restored ocean, one of the billions of humans who had survived the long sleep and found a new purpose in a changed galaxy. Kethvaros visited her often. The ambassador had retired from official duties but remained a close friend. They would sit together watching the waves, talking about the journey that had brought them to this point. "Do you ever regret it?" Kethvaros asked one afternoon. "The sleep? All those millennia you missed?" Yuki considered the question. "I regret the necessity. I wish our ancestors had been wise enough to avoid the conflicts that drove them to such extremes. But the sleep itself? No. It worked. The galaxy grew. We returned at the right time. I cannot regret something that led to everything we achieved." You could have ruled us all. You still could, probably. Yes, but ruling was never the point. Living was the point. Being part of something larger than ourselves. Finding meaning through connection, rather than control. She smiled at her old friend. My ancestors went to sleep believing that the galaxy could become wonderful. I got to wake up and see that they were right. That is more than most people ever receive. How could I regret anything that led to this? She died peacefully 3 years later, surrounded by friends from a dozen different species. Her passing was mourned across the galaxy. Not as the loss of a leader, but as the passing of a symbol. She had represented the best of what humanity could be, but her death was not an ending. It was part of a continuation. Humanity remained on Earth and spread throughout the stars, not as conquerors but as partners. The species that had once terrified itself with its own power learned to use that power in service of others. The civilization that had chosen extinction rather than domination became a model for cooperative growth. The wound in space-time healed completely over the following centuries. The galaxy continued to change and grow. New challenges arose and were met. The Federation that replaced the Concord evolved and adapted. Through it all, the story of the long sleep was remembered. Parents told children about the species that loved the galaxy so much they removed themselves from it. Teachers explained how humanity's return had transformed galactic civilization. Philosophers debated the ethics of self-imposed extinction and the meaning of partnership between unequal powers. And somewhere in the archives of every species, the message that Yuki had broadcast remained preserved. We did not sleep because we were weak. We slept because we were too strong, and the galaxy was too young. We woke because you were finally ready. The galaxy had been ready. And together, they had built something worthy of the wait. Humanity had finally come home.